You only get one shot at this thing called life. So make it as bold or as beautiful or as big or as purposeful or meaningful as you want it. But you do just get one shot. So live accordingly. So delighted to welcome you to our very first episode. Why did I start this podcast? Now, I thought of this really cool analogy and I hope it lands with you too. So you know what I like about parties? Love seeing my friends after a while, but I also really love meeting really cool, interesting people. Maybe that's the same for you. Now, I'm not a big fan of small talk, right? Like, how's the weather? Oh, did you drive here? Boring, right? But what I do love is a really good, fresh, stimulating conversation, right? I love those conversations that, make you think, make you go, that's cool. Conversations where you walk away feeling like you're hit with a jolt of motivation, or you walk away feeling inspired to do all the things you've been wanting to do, right? So think of Bold Hearted, this podcast, as almost like a party, but without having to leave the house. I know a lot of introverts listening is going to love that. So if you've known me for a while or met me at a party, you know I love talking about self-leadership, personal growth, and being multi-passionate because that's also core to who I am. I love encouraging people to own their voice, to own their power, whether in life and career. Explore all your passions, all the things that light you up, that bring you joy, even if they don't really make a lot of sense to a lot of people. That's fine. Live the entirety of their lives fully, and not just a tiny portion of their hopes and dreams, but live all of it. My motto, or something that I live by, is that you only get one shot at this thing called life. One shot. So make it as bold or as beautiful or as big or as purposeful or harmonious or meaningful as you want it. But you do just get one shot. So live accordingly. Now, the three things this podcast will center around is boldness, of course, courage, and resilience. Now, I don't know about you, but the traditional tried and true paths in life have never really excited me. Now, I should know, I went to engineering school after being awesome in math and physics in high school, only to realize that, that path was not really for me. I realized it right away after. Now, I'll dive more into all of that later because all that deserves its own episode. I'm allergic to almost being put in a box. And if you're listening to this, maybe you feel the same way. And the best life stories are not the ones that are linear. They're the ones that are varied and rich and colorful and frankly, sometimes a bit unexpected. Those are the kind of people I'm drawn to at a party. Like, hey, let's sit down. I want to know more about you. So think of Bold Hearted, this podcast basically like a party with your most inspirational besties and some really cool guests that you are stoked to meet. Now that's what this podcast is about. Together we'll dive into the mindset shifts we all need to be bold hearted and listen to the stories of awesome people who have done just that. And not just celebrities, but here we'll talk to people who are just like you and me, but they are blazing their own trail. So I hope that the collective wisdom from this podcast can act as your inspiration, your motivation, as basically fuel for your fire. So you can also be bold and blaze your own trail in big ways or small. So from here, welcome to the party. So today I want to talk about a topic that affects almost all of us when we're about to try something different or put out a piece of creative work or vulnerable work out into the world. And that is the fear of judgment, aka what will people think about me? In today's episode, the first thing I'll talk about is why this topic. Why did I pick the fear of judgment as the very first topic for Bold Hearted? Number two, how it can hold you back, how it actually held me back for a while as well. And finally, the 5 reasons why we should not listen to that voice of judgment in our heads and how we can start to move past it. So I thought To start with, this topic is so fitting and so relatable to so many of us because I myself had to battle this voice of judgment, this fear of judgment in my head when I was starting this podcast. I wanted to start this podcast a while ago, but then I talked myself out of it because I paid so much attention to that voice of judgment in my head. There were so many things that came up, so many reasons why I really shouldn't do it. For example, some of the stories I told myself was that, oh, people will think I'm ridiculous. Or do people really have any interest in listening to me? Or what will my colleagues say? Sounds so ridiculous, right? Now that I say it, now that you hear it, right? Like what reason to hold yourself back, Sabahat, right? But they're so real when they're actually happening to us in our heads. So all those things I had to battle and I had to get over in order to get to this point where I can launch this podcast. Now, I'm used to, of course, putting myself out there, but there are so many of us who have been holding back when putting out creative work into the world or when trying to dare to do something else, leave the traditional path and try out something else for themselves, right? Because the fear of judgment is so big in their heads. So let's dive a little bit deeper. Now, the fear of judgment, everybody suffers from it, like I said, okay? The dreaded, what will people think of me, right? And I said that in that voice because that is sort of that annoying little voice in our heads. It's like, what will my high school buddy from 20 years ago say? What will they think? Oh my God, they're all going to judge me, right? That is that annoying voice in our heads that we kind of have to be like, I'm so sorry, you have to sit down now. Like, we can't work with this, with you still being here in my head. So, sorry, please take a seat, right? Because this fear of judgment and that little annoying voice is holding you back. It holds you back in so many ways. It stunts your creativity. And that is sad because we all know we have these amazing things that are brewing in our heads. I know that you are a creative being. You have fantastic creative ideas that you want to act on. And you don't because of the fear of judgment. So you stunt your creativity. And here's the thing with creativity. The more you stunt it, the more you lose it. The more you unleash it and nurture your creativity, the more your creativity flourishes and the more creative you get. It's kind of like a muscle. If you work it, it gets stronger. If you ignore it, you lose it. So the fear of judgment holds you back by stunting your creativity, okay? You talk yourself out of your boldness as well because you're so scared of what people will think. And once again, that's also like a muscle. The more you dare, the more you can dare. And the less you dare, the more you tell yourself that, I can't do it. The more you live in that place of fear, the more you tell your body, send signals to your brain that, I'm good here, I don't want to do this. And you talk yourself out of boldness. And out of all of that, because of all that, you end up producing nothing, right? This fear of judgment, you stunt your creativity, you talk yourself out of boldness, you produce nothing. The world loses out on your gift, which is such a tragedy because the world deserves to see your gift. And finally comes the regret. Years go by and you haven't done what you wanted. Whether it was starting a blog, starting a YouTube channel, maybe changing a career altogether, maybe leaving your career in finance to go finally become an artist, or to go back to school and become an architect. All these unfulfilled passions, unexplored dreams that you've had, years go by because of the fear of judgment, you don't do anything, and 10 years later, 15 years later, you think, I kind of wish I had done it then. And some time ago, I read this study, which talked about regret, right? And it was so interesting. That study said that people are far more likely to regret the things they have not done than the things that they have done. So I'll repeat that again. People are far more likely to regret the things they have not done than the things that they have done. This study really highlighted that, and I thought it was so powerful because think about it. 15 years, 20 years later, and if you keep putting it off, you 15, 20 years later think, oh, I really regret not having done this in my 30s when I had, let's say, the time, or when I had more of a fire in me. I'm not saying it's too late, okay? There's always time. You always have time, but you missed out on that opportunity at that moment to do the things you wanted to do. And living with regret is awful. So do it now, of course. As they say, the next best time to do something when you haven't done it before is now. So in a nutshell, the fear of judgment is holding you back in so many ways. It's stunting your creativity, talking you out of your boldness. Your creativity and boldness muscles are kind of atrophying, right? Because you're not utilizing them. And you produce nothing. And at the end of the day, you might live with regret. And I don't want that for you, okay? I don't want that for you. So here we are. To make sure that I don't let you hold on to your fear of judgment and not do the things because you're so scared of what will people think, I have 5 reasons why you absolutely have to stop caring what people think. You ready? Reason number 1, those people that you're so scared of, their judgment, those people, they don't pay your bills. Now, I wanted to start off with the most basic, the most direct, the kind of almost funny and comical one, right? Yeah, they don't pay your bills. You're like, I know that, Sab, but it's still hard. Well, let me ask you this. Do they have a significant impact on your life? If so, how? Are they sending money to your bank account and you don't want to upset them? Are they paying your mortgage? Are they taking care of your aging parents? No, right? So if the answer to these is no, then I want you to ask yourself why their opinions and their judgments matter so much to you. I'm willing to bet it's simply conditioning, right? You're conditioned to think about what people will think, to worry about people's opinions, worry about people's judgment. In many cultures, including mine, I'm South Asian, right? The whole concept of what will people think is embedded in us from the time we were young. We grew up with this, especially women, even more so, right? We grew up thinking, oh my God, what will people think? And we put ourselves in a cage, in a prison, okay, in a box where we can't act out of. Because we think, if I do this, people will say this. If I do that, that person will say this. They will judge me. And then we just imprison ourselves into just one small little box, one little way of being. And I understand that that's how you grew up. Totally get it. But now it might be time to rewrite the story in your head, because that is all it is. It's a story in your head. This brings me to point number 2. Now, people don't think about you as much as you think they do, right? So this is good and bad at the same time. The bad part is that, oh, that's so sad. People don't think about me. But the good part is that, yeah, it's actually freedom to that. There's freedom in knowing that people are not thinking about you as much as you think they are, right? People could maybe, if you put out a blog, if you put something on YouTube, if you decide to quit your job and go back to school to be an architect, people might hear it and they might think about it or see it or look at it for 30 seconds. And they might say, that's interesting. And then you know what happens? They keep scrolling. They keep scrolling through their phones and then they land on the next piece of news. And then they forget about you. So maybe they'll think about you for 30, 40 seconds, and then they will move on to the next thing. People have their own things going on in their lives that has now demanded their attention. They have the next piece of news on social media, right? We all know, we've all seen these studies on how you can't keep people's attention on social media, right? We know these studies. You can't keep people's attention for more than, I think, 11 seconds or 10 seconds or something like that. This is why TikTok is so popular, etc. So knowing that, do you think anyone is spending a significant amount of time sitting, thinking about you and judging you? They're not. Numbers don't lie. Point number 3. The only ones who are judging you are the ones who have not done it yet. Our society is full of people with repressed dreams and unexplored passions and thoughts and ideas and creative ideas that they have not acted on. You won't believe it, but our society is filled with these people. They're everywhere. So there's so many people who have all these things they wish they did, but they have not done it yet. So the only ones who will judge you are the ones who have not done it yet, and they're secretly wishing that they could also muster the courage to put themselves out there. They also wish they had the courage to start writing that blog, to start that YouTube channel, to quit their job, to become an artist, or to change their industry altogether or become that architect that they always wanted to be, but they didn't. So if they are judging you, they're judging you because there is that little part of them that was like, oh, I wish I had a chance to do that. Oh, I wish I had the courage to do that. They're the only ones who look like they're judging you. But once again, they're not really judging because they're coming from a place of, I wish I had the courage to do that. Number 4, the trailblazers, okay? The people that you do admire. Okay, say the person who has changed their careers and become an architect that you've kind of been following on LinkedIn for a few years. You're like, my God, that person is a badass. I wish I was like them. Or that content creator you follow on YouTube and you think, they had the best travel blog. I wish I had that. I could totally have done that for the last few years, right? And you are looking at people who are 20 steps ahead of you, 50 steps ahead of you, right? And you're thinking, oh my God, what if they judge me? Guess what? Those people, number 1, they don't have the time to judge you because they're so busy doing the thing. They actually don't have the time or capacity to judge you. And second of all, they know what it took to do it. They know that they themselves had to fight through the fear of judgment, the fear of failure, all those fears to take the first step and start on the journey to become where they are. They are never going to be the ones to judge you because they're like, yep, I've been there. Yeah, that's step 1. I've been there. That was hard. The whole journey is hard, right? But those people who you admire, who are 20 steps ahead of you, they don't have the time to judge you and they have been there. They're never going to be the ones to judge you. And finally, number 5, the last one. What you think of yourself actually at the end of the day matters way more than what anyone else thinks about you. Do you know why? Imagine if you had to honestly and objectively describe yourself and your life. How would you do it? How would you describe yourself? Would you say you were brave, that you lived to the fullest and you put yourself out there because you loved yourself? Would you say you were full of talent that you actually used and nurtured? Would you say that you made the most of your life? Or will you say that you spent years shrinking because you're so afraid of what will people say if you acted bold? Will you say, oh, I had a lot of talent, but I didn't really use it. I had all these ideas and dreams, but I didn't really explore it because I was afraid of what people might say about me. I was afraid of the judgments of people. I lived in my head a lot. Which one would you say? How would you describe yourself if you had to do it? Let this question guide you, because what you think of yourself, and I'll repeat this, matters more than what anyone else thinks of you. You are the one that has to look at yourself in the mirror, who has to live with your life story. You are the steward for your life journey. Do you truly, truly love yourself? Do you know that you are enough? If so, what others think, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Because you love yourself enough to know that you are brave, that you are living your life to the fullest, and you're putting yourself out there. So I hope these 5 tips helped you understand what is really important and what is not so important, and you can differentiate between the 2 thoughts. Because, a lot of that fear that's in our head is just noise, and we just have to tell it to sit down and take it easy for a while we go and do the things that we are meant to do. Thank you so much for listening to episode 1 of Bold Hearted. I hope you got some great takeaways, and feel free to share this with someone that you know is going to enjoy this conversation as well.